Welcome back to Exposure Stories. Demi Moore's life has never been the glamorous Hollywood fairy tale people imagined. Long before she became one of the biggest stars in the world, she was a frightened child growing up in chaos. Born on November 11, 1962, in Roswell, Demi entered a life already marked by instability. Her biological father left before she was born, and her mother struggled with addiction, emotional instability, and financial hardship. By the time Demi was 14, her family had moved more than 30 times. There was never any sense of security, and even as a child she learned survival instead of comfort. In her memoir Inside Out, Demi later revealed shocking details about her childhood, including how her mother once allowed an older man to assault her for money. The trauma shaped nearly every relationship she would later have. When she was only 12, she witnessed her mother attempt suicide and physically tried to save her by pulling pills from her mouth. Moments like that forced her to grow up far too quickly. School offered little escape. Demi struggled with dyslexia and serious vision problems that required multiple surgeries. Feeling disconnected and unhappy, she dropped out at 16 and began supporting herself through odd jobs including modeling and debt collection. At 17, desperate for love and stability, she married musician Demi Moore. The marriage was less about romance and more about escaping loneliness and pain. Demi later admitted she knew deep down it wouldn't last, but she kept Freddie's surname, and Moore would eventually become one of Hollywood's most famous names. Her breakthrough came when she landed a role on the television soap opera General Hospital. Out of more than 1,000 actresses, Demi stood out with her intensity and vulnerability. She played journalist Jackie Templeton, a strong female character who connected with audiences during a time when television rarely gave women complex leading roles. But behind the scenes, Demi was battling addiction. She partied heavily and often disappeared into dangerous binges. Director Joel Schumacher saw enormous potential in her and offered her a life-changing ultimatum when casting her in St. Elmo's Fire: Get Sober or Lose the Role. Demi chose sobriety. The studio even hired someone to stay with her throughout filming to help keep her on track. The film became a defining movie of the 1980s and made Demi part of the famous Brat Pack, alongside actors like Rob Lowe and Emilio Estevez. The role that transformed her into a superstar came in 1990 with Ghost. The movie became one of the biggest box office successes of all time, and Demi's performance as Molly Jensen touched audiences worldwide. The pottery scene with Patrick Swayze became one of the most iconic romantic moments in film history. Her short haircut sparked a global trend, and suddenly Demi Moore wasn't just successful, she was a cultural icon. At the same time, her husband Bruce Willis was dominating theaters with the Die Hard franchise. Together they became one of Hollywood's most powerful couples. Demi and Bruce's romance moved fast. They met in 1987 and married only months later in Las Vegas. Both were becoming massive stars, yet for years they managed to build a family together. They had 3 daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah. Demi worked hard to balance motherhood with an exploding career. In 1991, she shocked the world by appearing nude and pregnant on the cover of Vanity Fair. The image became iconic and challenged society's ideas about motherhood and beauty. Demi refused to hide her pregnancy or apologize for being both maternal and glamorous. Professionally, she kept taking bold roles. In A Few Good Men, she starred alongside Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. Then came Indecent Proposal, which sparked huge debates about marriage and morality. In 1996, she shocked audiences again with Striptease, earning a record-breaking $12.5 million salary that made her the highest-paid actress in Hollywood at the time. A year later, she transformed herself physically for G.I. Jane, shaving her head and enduring brutal military-style training. These performances showed both strength and vulnerability, but the constant criticism and scrutiny deeply affected her emotionally. Behind the scenes, her marriage to Bruce Willis was struggling. Their demanding careers kept them apart, and despite their love for each other, the relationship slowly unraveled. In 1998, they separated after 11 years of marriage. Yet unlike most Hollywood divorces, theirs remained respectful and loving. They continued co-parenting their daughters and supporting each other publicly, becoming an example of how divorced parents could still remain family. Then, in 2003, Demi met Ashton Kutcher at the premiere of Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle. Demi was 40 years old while Ashton was 25, and their 15-year age gap instantly became tabloid obsession material. But despite the headlines, the connection between them was real. They reportedly spent hours talking on the phone shortly after meeting, discussing life, dreams, and spirituality. Their romance moved incredibly fast. Within months, Ashton had met Demi's daughters and Bruce Willis, and soon he proposed during a romantic beach picnic. The media became fascinated by their relationship. Everywhere they went, people joked about the age difference, and Demi was unfairly labeled with terms like cougar. Instead of hiding, they leaned into the attention with confidence and humor. In 2005, they married in a private ceremony attended by close friends and family, including Bruce Willis. Ashton embraced his role as stepfather to Demi's daughters, attending school events, supporting their interests, and trying to build meaningful relationships with them. For a time, their blended family seemed genuinely happy. But behind the glamorous image, tragedy was quietly destroying them. Demi became pregnant, and both she and Ashton were overjoyed. Then, 6 months into the pregnancy, they learned their baby girl, whom they had named Chaplain Ray, no longer had a heartbeat. The miscarriage devastated Demi completely. After nearly 20 years of sobriety, she spiraled emotionally and returned to alcohol and painkillers. Ashton struggled to fully understand the depth of her grief, and emotional distance grew between them. Desperate to save the marriage, Demi later admitted they experimented with things that left her feeling ashamed and emotionally broken, including threesomes Ashton reportedly encouraged. She believed she needed to become whoever he wanted in order to keep him from leaving. The marriage continued deteriorating, especially after rumors of Ashton cheating surfaced. In 2011, reports emerged that Ashton had spent the night with another woman on their wedding anniversary. Demi later revealed she discovered the betrayal through a Google alert on her phone. When she confronted Ashton, he admitted to cheating. The humiliation crushed her self-esteem, and in November 2011 she announced their separation. Their divorce became official in 2013, but emotionally Demi was already falling apart. After the split, Demi entered one of the darkest periods of her life. She relapsed heavily into addiction, abusing alcohol, nitrous oxide, and prescription painkillers. In January 2012, she suffered a terrifying seizure during a party at her home after using synthetic cannabis and inhaling nitrous oxide. Emergency services were called when she became semi-conscious and started shaking violently. Over the next few years, her health deteriorated dramatically. She became dangerously thin, isolated herself from loved ones, and withdrew from her daughters. The addiction deeply damaged her relationship with Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah. At one point, the girls stopped speaking to her entirely for nearly 3 years. Tallulah later described feeling as though her mother had become someone unrecognizable. Rumor admitted she carried anger and fear, while Scout felt emotionally abandoned. Eventually, Demi entered rehab and slowly began rebuilding her life. Therapy, treatment, and painful honesty became the foundation of her recovery. A major turning point came when Tallulah reached out to her mother after completing rehab herself. That reconnection opened the door for the family to heal together through therapy retreats and honest conversations. One constant throughout all the chaos remained Bruce Willis. Despite divorcing decades earlier, Demi and Bruce maintained a deeply loving friendship. When Bruce's family publicly revealed his aphasia diagnosis in 2022, Demi immediately stood beside him and his family in support. She has continued spending time with Bruce, his wife Emma Hemming Willis, and their children, showing the world that family can evolve without falling apart. Their daughters often say the respect and kindness between their parents gave them one of the healthiest examples of love they could imagine. Now, at 62, Demi Moore views life and love very differently. After decades of searching for validation through relationships and fame, she says she has finally learned to feel complete on her own. She describes her lifestyle as solo partnering, focusing on peace, healing, and emotional health rather than depending on romance for happiness. While she hasn't completely closed the door on love, She no longer believes another person can fix her wounds or define her worth. Instead, Demi has embraced healing, forgiveness, family, and self-acceptance. The woman who once seemed trapped in cycles of heartbreak and addiction has emerged wiser, calmer, and stronger. Behind the glamour and headlines was always someone fighting desperately to survive and finally learning how to live for herself. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.